Hello, and welcome back to 1 Minute Remaining. My name is Jack Lawrence, the host and creator of this show. Today, I'm speaking with a man who the state of Missouri has decided has 3 months to live. Marcellus Williams was handed a death sentence over 2 decades ago for the 1998 killing of local newspaper reporter Felicia Gale. It's a crime he not only says he didn't commit, but one that a number of independent experts say DNA evidence proves he's innocent of. The execution of criminals has been used by nearly all societies since the beginning of civilization on Earth. However, the practice has since been abolished in all but 52 countries around the world, with the United States being the only Western nation still to use it. However, of course, a number of states around the United States have abolished its use, the first being Michigan all the way back in 1847, followed by Wisconsin, Maine, and Rhode Island, with many more following suit. However, to date, 27 states still have capital punishment. And there are reports that there are around 2,262 men and women currently incarcerated on death row across the country. One of those states in which the death penalty is still widely used is the state of Missouri. In the past decade, the state has carried out 23 executions. It's the 4th highest number in the country. They in fact put to death a man in April by the name of Brian Dorsey, a man who had a petition signed by over 70 correctional officers asking for his sentence to be reduced to life without parole. And possibly even more sobering was when I asked Marcellus if there was anyone else on the row waiting on a date. Where you are housed now at the moment, are you by yourself or is there other people waiting on dates for execution?
Yeah, it's a guy next door. He got a date for next Tuesday.
Oh, shit.
He's supposed to be actual next Tuesday. His name is Dave Hauser. I'm surprised you ain't heard of him. He has a actual execution date for Tuesday. But me and him, we the only ones right now with dates, actual dates.
The threat of death is nothing new for the man who spent over 2 decades in prison trying to fight his conviction. And just a few weeks ago, the Missouri Supreme Court scheduled Marcellus to be executed on September the 24th at 6 p.m. It's in fact the 3rd time he's been given a date, and only narrowly escaped death the last time.
The Missouri governor issued a last-minute stay of execution for death row prisoner Marcellus Williams, only hours before he was slated to be put to death Tuesday night.
I first came across Marcellus's story when I saw a post that had been made by the Innocence Project, who, along with a number of other attorneys, has been fighting his case for some time. After seeing his story, I wanted to reach out to see if I could speak with him. I wasn't keen on my chances as I'd attempted to speak with others on death row before with no joy. Their sentence is usually carried out different to general population. They are confined to their cells in a form of solitary confinement with strict access to communication. Nonetheless, I tracked down Marcellus and sent him a message. He replied telling me he in fact had 24/7 access to a phone, seemingly a privilege offered to those who have been given their date. So as always, before we get to why and how, first we start with the who. Who is Marcellus Williams? Did you grow up in Missouri? Was that where you were born and raised?
I grew up in Missouri, but I was born in South Bend, Indiana. And when I was little, my mother was going back and forth from South Bend, Indiana to St. Louis, and then she decided to firmly stay in St. Louis when I was about probably in the 2nd grade, you know what I'm saying, something like that. So I've been in St. Louis since about the 2nd grade permanently, you know what I mean? So yeah, I actually grew up in St. Louis, yeah. Right. But a lot of my relatives still, they in South Bend, Indiana.
And do you come from a big family?
You know, my mother had 4 boys. I'm the 3rd boy that my mother had, so I didn't grow up with any sisters other than my cousin, my female cousin, she was the only girl, around us for many, many, many years until she had a little brother, you know what I'm saying? So my family was close-knit. We grew up under my grandparents. At one point that, we all stayed in the same house, my grandparents and a lot of my uncles and aunties and, until my mother ended up with her own house, so about the time I was going to the 5th grade. So yeah, we got a pretty big family, yeah.
Happy childhood?
I guess a childhood that's expected, growing up with, the challenges of, I guess, poverty. But
yeah.
I say poverty because we didn't have a lot, but I can never say that I can never remember a time that I actually went hungry. You know what I'm saying? Happy in the sense that a child doesn't understand, the stresses that life really brings. You know what I mean? So, yeah, when you say happy childhood, hindsight looking at it, yeah, I would say, even though, like I say, we had different challenges economically,
He says that all in all, school life for him was relatively easy. Although he seemed to breeze through certain subjects, he really didn't apply himself. He never gave much weight to education or took it seriously, and says that he spent too much time rebelling and pushing back. Yeah. What do you think you were rebelling against?
I don't know. You know what I'm saying? My father wasn't in my life, so even though I had my grandfather as my, the man role model, taking care of his family and working a job and things like that, and my uncles up to a point, but I don't know, maybe that played a role in it. Looking back on it, I can't really explain it because, you're a child, you just, just lashing out, I guess. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Just one of those things, fall in place,
A rebellious Marcel makes his way through school, getting himself into trouble with teachers here and there, but it never really went much further. However, he says that come his teenage years, growing up in the streets of St. Louis, it wasn't long until he found the trouble he was getting in would make its way out of the classroom.
Yeah, teenage years, that's a little bit, the streets of St. Louis is kind of rough, so,
yeah.
You start focusing in on, want to have finances, want to have vehicles, want to have, the latest this, the latest that, and keeping with the, the status quo or the cultural norms, especially dealing with your peers. So, you out there and you don't have a job, so you out there doing whatever you do in the streets,
Marcellus makes no claims that he was some form of choir boy in his younger years and would make many a poor decision in life. That would, in fact, find him incarcerated for the first time at just 18 years old. Yeah, I mean, I was speaking with actually Christopher Dunn, who also grew up in St. Louis. He was telling me that it was a very tough place to grow up. There was a lot of gangs around and that sort of stuff. Did you ever gravitate towards the gang situation?
No, the guys I grew up with, wasn't no gangs. We just was cool with each other. You know what I'm saying? We have your friends, your peers, but the gangs came later on. Once I ended up going to prison, I went to prison when I was 18 years old.
Right.
And then when I got out in 90, I went to prison at the beginning of 88 and got out like late part of 89, I'll say, yeah.
Right.
Then the gangs like the Crips and Bloods from California, they came in, but I never partook in anything like that.
Do you mind me asking what your first prison sentence was in relation to?
My first prison sentence had something to do with stealing a car or being I wasn't charged with stealing the car. I was charged with what they call tampering. Yeah, that's what they call it, tampering with a motor vehicle. And also assault on a police officer. They said that me and my partner, we shot at the police, but that was to justify the police shooting my friend. You know what I mean? I ended up going to prison for that in a burglary case.
So, I mean, what was your first prison experience like? Was it a terrifying thing for a young? Because, I mean, at 18, you're still pretty young.
No, I wouldn't say it was terrifying because it's just like, you go through from the streets to juvenile detention centers and some of the same people you see in the streets and juvenile you see in prison, even though many, many, many new faces, of course. but it wasn't terrifying for me, you know what I'm saying? So I'm 6'4", and, pretty much, I was real slim, and I was very athletic, always able to play basketball and things like that, but I wouldn't say I was afraid at all. I knew how to, mind my business, and I knew how to, if something came my way, I knew that you have to deal with it immediately, you know what I'm saying, and not let it fester,
After his first prison stint, he comes out, heads home and says that he gets himself a job. His aim was to get himself back on track, back on the straight and narrow, and not go back to prison. However, it's not long before his old habits and desires to better his life quicker would find himself yet again making the wrong decisions.
I ended up getting a job when I got out and going to a little school, a trade school. And when I got out, I ended up, my son, I have one son, his mother ended up getting pregnant by me. And about, I would say, January of 90, the end of December of 89, January of 90. So I had a job and I was going to the school, National Training Center, but still, I didn't have my bearings with me, what I'm saying? It's still like you have these whims and desires, and you still want to, in your mind somehow, you try to, instead of sticking to it and being patient and doing it the right way and being like a law-abiding citizen, I still resorted to, the criminal path, what I'm saying? So yes, I end up going back to prison,
What year was that when you went back?
In August of 90, August of 90.
And how long was that stretch for?
Now, that was for 7 straight years. I had 7 years, and I did the whole 7 flat. And I ended up going to, more high-level prisons in Missouri, with the old MSP, the old Missouri State Prison. I ended up actually going there. I was at lower-level camps at first, and then I ended up getting my level bumped up, and I ended up going there in 1992. But I ended up in a paralegal course and, learned a little bit about the law or whatever, I always enrolled and had something to do with education in school for some reason, because I always loved to read and, I just had this love for reading. I guess I get that from my father,
So that second stretch, you did 7 years, you come out again. Is that towards the sort of late 90s when you come out?
Yeah, I got out in August of 97, I ended up going to the first time Kansas City, Missouri. I ended up going from where I was at in the prison straight to Kansas City, Missouri, and, living there for a few months until about December of 97. And I ended up going back to St. Louis, so yeah. Eventually, I got locked back up in August of 98, and I've been locked up ever since.
So at age 29, his rap sheet has certainly grown, with multiple convictions under his name. And he's back in prison with not 1, but 2 robbery charges.
So I had 2 robberies, one in the county that was a bogus charge, and then one in the city, and I actually did that. I got 20 years for that.
Right. Did you try and fight that case?
Yeah, I have been fighting all of my cases. I went to trial on every one of them.
Right.
But the one out in the county, they used the same state witness that they used in this murder case to say that I was one of the guys in the ski mask, 3 guys in the ski mask that's robbing this restaurant, and the person is saying that I am one of the persons in the ski mask. And they used that to give me this robbery case out in the county of St. Louis.
As Marcellus states, the prosecution would bring forward a witness to testify against him on the robbery charge, which he says he was not part of. This same witness would also be used against him in the upcoming murder charge. But more on that shortly. So when did you first hear about this allegation of the murder of Miss Gale?
That was about almost a year. I'm gonna say about close to a year.
Okay.
I had been locked up already. Yeah. Then some detectives came while I was locked up, pending the robbery case, going back and forth to court on that. Tried to talk to me about it, but I had refused to talk to them. And once they told me the charges, I was like, what? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is very serious charges. And they was like, yeah. I said, yeah, I need to have my attorney, you know what I'm saying, present or whatever. So I never did have it actually be questioned by him,
And were you using just a public defender at the time?
Always. I always only had a public defender. I didn't have any, finances. Yeah. So I always had to use the state's, public defender. Yeah.
Felicia Gale was born and grew up in Rockford, Illinois. She had graduated from the University of Illinois with a degree in journalism and would make her way into that particular career. In 1981, she was working as a reporter for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, where she stayed until 1992. She would leave the newspaper to pursue more philanthropy and volunteer work. In 1998, Felicia Gale lived with her husband, Dr. Daniel Pikus, in a home in University City. It's a suburb of St. Louis, Missouri. They had known each other since childhood in Rockford, and he was working as a radiologist at Barnes Jewish Hospital. On August 11th, 1998, 42-year-old Felicia Gale was at home when someone broke in. The offender would take a butcher's knife from the kitchen and stab her 16 times. Her husband Daniel would be the one who sadly would come home and find the horrific scene. And Felicia still had the knife used to kill her lodged in her neck. Detectives would discover that her purse, a jacket, and her husband's laptop were missing, along with some other minor items from the home. The crime scene itself appeared at the time to be quite the treasure trove of potential evidence. There were bloody footprints through the scene that didn't match the victim, her husband, or any of the first responders. Bloody fingerprints were found on areas of the walls, as well as hair samples, some of which were pubic hairs, found on Felicia and on a recently vacuumed rug. Not only that, but of course, they had the murder weapon. The autopsy report later stated that Felicia had sustained over 40 injuries from the knife, 16 stab wounds, and the most notable being to her neck, where the knife had been left. It was noted that this murder seemed eerily similar to one that had been committed just a month prior, around 3 miles away, where a woman was also stabbed and killed at her home with a knife from her own kitchen. That knife had also been left in her neck. They seemed so similar that the medical examiner went as far as to say she believed that these two cases could be related. The police seemingly had an abundance of leads to follow. However, 10 months later, with little to no breakthroughs on the case, Felicia's husband would put up $10,000 of his own money as a reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction in the case. It was just after this reward had been offered that police were contacted by 2 people who said they had information on the case. The first being Henry Cole, who would tell police that Marcellus confessed to him in prison in 1998 while the pair were serving time together. Did you know Mr. Cole?
I didn't know him until, when we was locked up together in if you can picture like the workhouse, it's like a big bay, like an area with like lots of different beds. It's no rooms or no divider, but it's like you have bunks.
Yep.
Beds going down the road like that. It was like in big open space, you know what I'm saying, like that. So yeah, if you ever seen any pictures of the workhouse, we was in the workhouse together. I just knew him through one of my cousins. He's the uncle of one of my cousins.
Right, okay. And so
but I didn't know him until then.
Was it the detectives that told you that they had a witness against you?
No.
Henry Cole was a career criminal and had convictions that stretched back decades. As soon as he was released from prison, he immediately goes to police to tell them what he supposedly knew about the crime. He tells the police that while in prison together, he and Marcellus were watching TV when a news report came on about the murder. He says Marcellus bragged to him that he had been the one to commit the murder and get away with it. He says that over the coming days, Marcellus would continue to talk about the crime, giving him more and more details. Details which Henry Cole says that he had written down on a piece of paper, which he hands to the police officers. There was many issues with Mr. Cole's accounts of what he'd been told by Marcellus Williams. One of the biggest and oddest ones was that apparently Marcellus had told Henry Cole that he'd worn gloves during the attack. However, you may recall from the crime scene itself, there was multiple bloody fingerprints found all over the scene. So if Marcellus Williams was wearing gloves during the crime, how on earth would he leave fingerprints everywhere? The second witness was the one we mentioned briefly a moment ago. She's a former girlfriend of Marcellus's, Lara Azario. Miss Azario, who had she testified against you in a different case?
Right, that's the case I'm talking about. In the robbery case, they used her, and they wanted to get this robbery on me so they can have aggravators for the murder case to make sure you can get the death penalty if you have aggravators, certain assaultive aggravators. So they had to find me guilty for that robbery. They made sure they died in Brentwood, St. Louis County. So they used her to say that one of the three guys who had on masks, ski masks, all three of these guys had on ski masks and gloves. They used her to say that one of these guys was me. But this actual restaurant, two of the guys, they actually knew me, and they actually came to court and said that they didn't believe it was me. And the detectives tried to get them to say that, just say that you know him, show them a picture of me, and say, just sign here to say that you just know Marcellus Williams. So they signed it, but when they got to trial, the prosecutor was like, but didn't you sign this picture saying that he was the one? They was like, no, I didn't sign that picture saying he was the one. I signed the picture because the detective saying that, sign this here saying that you know him. You know what I'm saying? Which they did know me, you know what I mean? Yeah. But one of them even said, I'm not going to send an innocent man to jail. But they was like, no, I didn't say that it was him. I don't believe it was him. You know, but they still used this Laura Cerro to say that this video, three guys, all of them got on ski masks, gloves and everything. One of them is me, you know, and this is how I got convicted of this case, you know, this robbery case. So they used her in that case.
She's apparently identified you even though all the guys were wearing ski masks.
Right, every single person has a ski mask on and gloves, but they used her to say that this one guy in the video is me. So they used that, found me guilty. Somehow the jury found me guilty. This is in the robbery case. And they used that case also as an aggravator to enhance, you know what I'm saying, my murder case so I can get the death penalty.
So all of this is a little confusing, so I'm going to try and explain it for you. So Marcellus had been arrested for 2 robberies. One he says that he did commit, he was guilty of, and he'd been sentenced to 20 years for. The other robbery involved 3 men with guns and ski masks. There was video footage of the crime, but all 3 men were wearing ski masks, as mentioned, and gloves. Essentially, they're completely covered from head to toe. However, police would use Marcellus's former partner to point him out in the footage and say that she believed that he was in fact one of those men. Marcellus says that he knew a couple of guys from the restaurant who told police that they knew him and did not believe him to be any one of the people that robbed the restaurant. Marcellus says that police show them a picture of him and just say, "But you know this guy, right?" "Well, yes, we do," they say. "Well, just sign it to say that you know him." At court, the prosecution say, "So you're saying you don't believe Marcellus was the one who committed the crime, yet you signed this picture to say that it was him? But why go to all this effort to convict him of the second robbery?" Well, Marcellus says that he believes it's so that he could be eligible for the death penalty for the murder the police were now saying he committed. How does this work? Well, if a weapon is used in the commission of a robbery, the charge becomes aggravated robbery, which carries with it a much harsher sentence because it is a much more serious crime, and would mean that Marcellus was eligible for the death penalty in this murder charge. In Missouri, there are a number of ways in which you can be eligible for the death penalty. In fact, 17. With Marcellus's background, although extensive, he would not have in fact been eligible under any of these 17 reasons for the death penalty. However, the law states that first-degree murder is punishable by death when the offence was committed by a person with a prior record or conviction for murder, not Marcellus, or the offence was committed by a person who has one or more serious assaultive criminal convictions. So with Marcellus being found guilty of aggravated robbery, that now makes him eligible for the death penalty. Lara Azario had also told police that Marcellus confessed to her about the crime and apparently provided details about the case that had not been made public. So let's take a look at this statement made by Marcellus's former partner. She tells police that Marcellus had said that he'd broken into the home but had been surprised by the fact that Felicia was in the home. She got out of the shower, come downstairs, and that is when Marcellus killed her. She says Marcellus told her that Felicia fought for her life and had scratched him multiple times. She had in fact seen visual scratches on him. Felicia's fingernails had been swabbed and clipped. They had in fact found some skin and fibres under her fingernails, which was tested. However, the tests come back and they do not match Marcellus Williams. The strongest evidence against Marcellus would be what she tells police next. She says that she saw some of Felicia's property inside the trunk of Marcellus's car, including the missing laptop, and that in fact Marcellus had sold it to a man named Glenn Roberts a few days after the murder. She told police that if they looked in his car, they would find property belonging to the victim. So, police do, and indeed would find items that had been taken from Felicia Gale's home. Now that to anyone listening would sound highly suspicious. And in fact, that was all the evidence the police now needed to formally charge Marcellus for the murder of Felicia Gale. And he was set to be tried and could face the death penalty. We've obviously got, a public defender trying to help you with that case.
If you charge with a potential death penalty case, you get two attorneys.
Right.
So I had two. They wasn't public defenders. I had two private attorneys that was paid by the state, so you might well still say they was public defenders, but they really wasn't. They was private attorneys, but they was appointed by the state, the court. You know what I mean?
Did you remember your first discussion with those attorneys about this particular case and what was discussed?
First discussion with them, I can't remember the first discussion. Of course, generally, if I can just speak generally, it's going to be about, of course, I had nothing to do with this and about what kind of preparations they was making in regards to preparing to, combat this stuff. You know what I mean? Once I was seeing different police reports and I was like, hold up, this police report is saying this, and I was trying to point out different things to them to show that, hey, you know what I'm saying, this doesn't even make any sense. Look at this, you know what I'm saying?
You have 1 minute remaining.
And that's all we have time for. But coming up, a case that may appear, on the outside, strong for the prosecution, would ultimately whittle down to being built entirely on the testimony from two incredibly questionable witnesses. Nothing at the crime scene would come back as a match for Marcellus Williams. Police destroy valuable evidence. A highly biased and questionable jury selection process is done. And ultimately, decades later, DNA testing would be conducted on the murder weapon used that day and would come back excluding Marcellus Williams from this crime. So when you got that news that this DNA testing was done and it came back and it excluded you from, being a contributor, surely you must have thought, well, there's the slam dunk, that's it.
No, I didn't think that because I done seen it happen to too many people. I done seen people have DNA that excluded them and they still spend many, many years incarcerated, still fighting to get out. I done seen it happen over and over and over and over.
Next time on 1 Minute Remaining. 1 Minute Remaining is a Mashed Pumpkin production, created, hosted and produced by Jack Lawrence. Audio and sound design by Jack Lawrence and Dom Evans of Earsay.